Usually it's Eduardo who presents, like we have like all these different hosts, and today was Eduardo's link, but he's also in Argentina with very limited internet connection. So here I am trying to host this meeting where we will have Dominik Deffner. Dominik is a computational behavioral scientist that combines theoretical and empirical research to better understand how individuals, groups, and populations adapt to changing environments. He completed his master's in evolutionary and comparative psychology at the University of St Andrews in the UK. And he then went on and got his PhD at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology. And he's now, let me see if I say this correctly, he's now doing a postdoc at the Cluster of Excellent Science of Intelligence, where he explores how human and robotic groups collectively balance individual and social information use. So with his background in psychology and anthropology, for his work, he uses simulations, computation and modeling, formal mathematical theory, and also field data to do a lot of cool research. And today he's going to be sharing with us a little bit of this, of his research during his talk, Social Decision-Making in Unconstrained Human Collectives. And with that, I think I said everything I had about Dominik. Dominik, if you want to start trying to share your screen, and David, if you can start the live stream, if we are not already.
We are live.
We are live. Perfect. So we can see your screen, and with no further ado, because we are a little bit late, whenever you want, Dominik, we listen.
Okay, so thank you very much for the very kind introduction and invitation to speak in the seminar series. So I'm in Finland right now, as already said, in a tiny, cute cabin right next to a frozen lake. So I don't want to make you jealous, and I hope the internet will be stable. But yeah, so I'll also be speaking about this work later. But yeah, in the next 45 minutes or so, I want to talk about a range of different projects where we try to apply computational modeling tools to understand how individuals in groups make decisions and how individual level strategies then influence collective outcomes. And as you can see from the pictures, it will be quite a tour, so both methodologically and also geographically. So as you said, I did my PhD in anthropology. Yeah, I think there's someone not muted, right? Yeah. Yes, as you said, I did my PhD in anthropology department. So my focus is really on why humans are so adaptive, right? So humans are immensely adaptable animals with essentially the same genes and the same brains. We're able to survive, make a living, and build complex societies in vastly different environments. So from tropical rainforest to the Arctic, and small villages to mega cities. And what's important about human adaptation is that this is not just because of our individual intelligence, right? But almost all aspects of human adaptation are collective. And so this includes both short-term cooperation and coordination, as in this tug of war in the bottom, but also longer-term cultural evolutionary processes. And if we want to know how collective dynamics emerge, it's of course important to understand the decision-making mechanisms of the individuals that comprise the collective, right? And so the way individuals weigh individual information, so what they've learned about the environment themselves, and social information about what they observe in others, is really driving important outcomes in collective systems. And so usually when psychologists study such questions, they did it in paradigms like that in my own PhD work. So here, people were asked to choose between 4 specified options. So 4 different plants to crop at specific time points. They could access both their payoff information from previous rounds and could update their beliefs over time. And they could also observe choices made by others. And then using such very simplified paradigms, we can, for example, apply reinforcement learning models and augment them with social features to explain how their learning strategies change and how they determine individual and collective success. But decision-making in the real world is very different from this. So people in the real world, like LeBron James here, making his record shot, need to make decisions on many, many different time scales. And they need to continuously integrate individual and social information. So see what his teammates are doing, see what the opponents are doing, and then decide on many different levels what to do. So decision-making in the real world is really unconstrained. It's not like in those psychology experiments where you have these rounds. And what's really important about this decision-making is that the environment you're exposed to is also shaped by the actions of an agent, right? So where you go will determine what you can see and which actions you have available. And so decision makers in real-world environments, they partly shape the environment that they're exposed to. And this is not the case in almost all experiments, right? Where you are just faced with some imposed environment that you cannot control. So if you want to apply computational models to understand decision-making in more unconstrained scenarios, we need to solve two related inference problems. So first, in experiments, it's usually very clear what a decision is and which options they had, right? We just present people with those options. But in more naturalistic scenarios, we first need to identify a decision. So what even is in this messy data stream that we get? What is a decision? And that can be done through just manual annotation or a simple decision tree, but then also using more advanced machine learning techniques or state-based models that I will talk about later. And then we also need to define option spaces. So what was possible at a given point in time, and for that we can also look at different constraints that individuals were facing with, and then simulate counterfactual actions to actually better understand the action that people took. We will also talk about examples of that later. And then once we have identified the decisions, we can use computational models developed in cognitive neuroscience, computational psychology, and so on, to use information that people had about the environment, so information about their sampling processes, and then apply those psychological process models to understand how they transformed the information they derived from the environment in order to make a decision. So this has all been quite abstract so far, but I will go into much more detail now. So today, for the rest of the talk, I'll be speaking about foraging, and especially collective foraging as a model system to better understand decision-making in social systems. And so foraging, I think I don't need to explain this for biologists, but for psychologists, I always need to explain this because they just don't know this word. It just means, finding and collecting resources in complex environments. So here in this example, those tiny little agents, they're searching for these gray resource patches. And what's nice about foraging is that it unites a lot of key cognitive and social challenges. So you need to navigate an uncertain environment. You need to learn based on your past success. You can observe others. You might also cooperate with others or compete for limited resources. So it's really a test bed that allows us to understand many, many different processes within a relatively simplified setting where we know what people are trying to do. And moreover, foraging, and especially collective foraging, has also been described by anthropologists as one of the key abilities that allow humans to spread through the globe and adapt to vastly different environments. So here we have examples of the Mardu in Australia, and the Hadza in Tanzania, and our Finnish ice fishers that I will be talking about today. And so what I want to do today is talk about a couple of different projects, going from agent-based simulations to collective foraging experiments in immersive reality to then collective foraging in the wild. And as we go through the projects, we get more and more naturalism, but also less and less experimental control, right? So in the first case, we can both control the environment that agents are exposed to, but we can also directly control their decision-making and then observe the collective dynamics. In the second case, we can still control the environment, but we need to infer the decision-making. And in the third case, we are just, faced with like the messiness of the real world. So we both cannot really control the environment and also not the cognition, but we still want to say something about what causes the collective dynamics there. So I'll start with the simulation. Together with David Massey, who is a PhD student of ours, we constructed this mechanistic and spatially explicit agent-based simulation model. So here in this model, agents could be in 3 different states at each point in time. They could either explore independently, which is marked by in blue. They could use social information and relocate towards successful others, which is marked in pink, and they could exploit a patch, so just extract resources from the environment. And agents, they switched between those different states based on 2 different integrators, or you could also call them neurons. So an individual integrator responds to personal information in the environment. Once it hits a threshold, it switches to exploitation. But what's more important is the social integrator that continuously integrates visual social information from an agent's field of view. And then once there was a lot of success information in their visual field, and they cross the threshold, then they switch to social relocation and approach successful others. Yeah, so you can see those dynamics here as well. And what's really nice about it is that with one parameter, this epsilon W there, we can essentially control how strongly agents respond to social information. And by that, really shape the collective dynamics. So all we're changing here is how agents internally respond to the visual information they have. And that really influences the whole dynamics, right? So in the first go, we just look at different resource distributions on the x-axis. So we varied resources from very concentrated one, where we have few patches that contain a lot of resources, to a very distributed one, where we have a lot of patches, but with fewer resources. So it's always the same number of total resources, and they're either concentrated in few but rich patches or distributed among many but poor patches. And what you can see here is that the distribution of resources in the environment clearly shapes like the adaptive benefits of social information use. So in concentrated environments, it pays off for agents to strongly integrate social information, which makes them frequently switch to the social mode and approach others to collectively exploit a patch. But in more distributed resources, it's better to explore the environment independently. And what's really nice about this model and the mechanistic nature of it is that we can look at many different real-world perceptual constraints, for example, or also just like physical constraints. And we look at a lot of different things in the paper, but I'll just talk about 2 here. So first, we just compared simulations where other agents were occluding others from the field of view. So as in the real world, right, if something is in front of something else, you cannot see this thing behind. But in many idealized models, they don't take that stuff into account, right? Because they don't explicitly model the visual field of agents, but they just have some transition probabilities. And what we find here, for example, is that just including the simple feature that's prevalent in every real-world system, we really get different social dynamics. So, for example, if we include this occlusion, then also in uniform environments, agents perform much, much better, even if they respond to social information. And this is just because this occlusion is leading essentially to a form of self-organization. So some people or some agents are already exploiting a patch, and then they're shielding this visual information from others. So agents that are far away from a patch, they don't decide to join. So it's essentially only close by agents, they will exploit a patch, and others that are further away will continue exploring the environment because the discovered resource is shielded by others. And so this leads to more efficient exploration of the environment. By not changing anything, but just having this visual occlusion. And then, like we, for example, also looked at different fields of view. So agents could either have a very narrow field of view, only respond to information that's directly in front of them, or they could have a very wide field of view, which made them respond to information also behind them. And we can see that for a lot of environments, for example, the ones marked with the ABC there, there is an intermediate optimum of field of view. So it's not good to have, as much information as possible available, because then you might be overreacting to social information. So even stuff that's happening behind you far away might attract your attention. But also, yeah, if your field of view is too narrow, then of course you cannot exploit social information at all, right? So there is often this intermediate level that that optimally balances individual exploration of the environment and this collective exploitation of found resources. So David is also working on swarm robotics platforms, and this is really his work. So I'm collaborating with him on the design, but I have no idea about the technical implementation. So here he has, for example, implemented a swarming algorithm in robots. And what we are trying to do is essentially doing the same simulations, but in the real robots. So what we have so far, for example, is this visual projection where a simulated swarm of fish is projected on the ground, and then those two robots, they're trying to catch them, essentially. And so this really, is a really cool intermediate ground between like virtual reality and like the real world, right? And you can really play with different features of the robots, like physical constraints. And what's really cool with this like projection setup that David created is that we can essentially use any simulation to create like fish swarms or any other resource, and then make the robots forage in this environment. So I'm happy to answer some questions about this, but as I said, I'm not an expert on